Hi everyone, and welcome to the Student Alliance for Prison Reform second webinar, Ask the Experts, on Reentry. And we had a slight change of speakers, so with us today we have Rosa Otieno, who is one of our SAPRA members from Boston University, and she's about to be joining Teach for America in the fall. So Rosa is here today because she's a research assistant for the Boston Reentry Studies Project. And we're also here with Matt Burke from Martha's Vineyard Office of Community Corrections, and he works a lot with people who are reentering the community. And so we are both, we're excited to hear about their experiences. So Matt, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about your job at the Office of Community Corrections and how you work with people who are reentering.
My job title is Job Developer / Adult Basic Education Coordinator. The way I work with the guys reintegrating is try to make sure they have a resume, a copy of a birth certificate, a copy of a social security number, because without those things, walking out the door of any jail or prison just sets you up for defeat. Any boss that you have wants to know that you are who you say you are. So before they even get out the door, there are steps to go through. So I go through those steps, try and find them jobs, set up proper living situations. Most people that are released into the community cannot live with the people that they lived with before, because a lot of the times it's a domestic thing, or it's a house, not especially down on the Vineyard, but you'll have lots of housing where a group of guys or a group of women will rent a house for the winter, with all the accompanying problems of a bunch of people living in a place that aren't related. So most of the crimes that they have committed are around drugs or alcohol, so you have to make sure they're clean, but that's also a selling point sometimes with employers. I can prove to them that the people I'm sending them are not using drugs and alcohol, because they have to be tested in order to be in the program. But what I do, it's different day to day. Every guy that comes out of jail is different than the next guy coming out. Some need education, literal education, high school diploma or high set. That's the first thing we work on. A lot of these guys have really scattered job histories with lots of gaps from being incarcerated. So you teach them how to write resumes that are not chronological, but talk about skill sets, talk about experiences, but you can't do it from, I worked in June 2000 to June 2004, because most of my guys don't have that job history. So again, it's hard to say what I do, but I can tell you about all the pieces of what I do.
Wonderful. That helps us understand. And Rosa, can you tell us about the Boston Reentry study that you work with?
Sure. So I work as a research assistant on the Boston Reentry study, which is led by Bruce Western at Harvard University. He's a professor of sociology and criminal justice. So what we do is we have conducted a longitudinal study of the lives of people who have recently been released from prison, and we have a pretty diverse population consisting of both male and females, also people from many different ethnic backgrounds as well. So there are some pretty unique trends that we're finding. So yeah, this past summer I worked on this project to take all the data. So we conducted about 130 interviews over the course of the past 3 years, and then this summer we went through all of the audio files from the interviews that were conducted. There were 6 interviews conducted over the course of a year, with each respondent, and we listened to all of those audio files and then constructed life history timelines. So after constructing about 40 timelines, we're now going to look at certain things that reoccur among our population, such as like adverse childhood experiences or violence at a young age, and other trends. So there's a lot of interesting data coming from that study.
That's great. So, expanding on both of your expertise, I want to first define what reentry is talking about. So the problem that both of you work with is, the transition of people who have been formerly incarcerated from prisons or jails back into the community. And so I know, Matt, you touched on this a little bit, but how would both of you characterize the population that you work with? Like Rosa, in your study, how would you characterize the stories that you've been seeing, and especially longitudinally over time? And we can see if there are any similarities and use that information to delve further into what we're talking about. So Matt, you can start by just recharacterizing the people that you work with.
The vast majority of the people I work with have problems centered around drugs and alcohol, which have either been a part of when they committed crimes or why they committed crimes. I'm sure a lot of the populations that Rosa and I deal with will have the similarities of trauma histories that have usually not been dealt with, self-medicating around schizophrenia, any bipolar stuff. I know that nationally, the majority of people in jail have either a diagnosed or an undiagnosed mental illness. So which do you treat first? Jails are not in the treatment business. So you may get someone who comes out clean, but their addiction hasn't been addressed at all, other than they may not have gotten a chance to use behind the walls. Anywhere from 18 to 60 I've dealt with. And I'm going to presuppose that Rosa does the same thing. There's not an age group for people reintegrating into the community. And sometimes the biggest problem is they reintegrate back into their old community without any continuum of care on the way out. So those are things I deal with.
Right, exactly. And Rosa, do you have anything to add to that?
I would probably say that the majority are African American males from our population, our sample. Also, they tend to be pretty young. I'd say between the ages of 18 and 30. And yeah, I mean, there also are, of course, we tend to forget about women as well. But I think I would characterize the population as black males mostly, from our sample at least. So yeah, that's always something where we remain cautious of, is just trying to pull from. There are a lot of others, but I'd say that's the majority. So.
Right, okay. That makes sense. Thank you to both of you. So I guess my next question would be, what problems or challenges this population that you've been working with face after leaving an incarceration setting, in terms of the role of family and housing, education, employment, and how, these factors, or the lack thereof, affect their reentry into society.
Well, I can speak to the Vineyard and the fact that housing down here is extremely expensive for anybody. But then you get someone who gets released into the community who probably isn't driving. That's the most of our people do not have a license anymore. They can't rent down here because they are known. It's a super small community, especially after the summer. So where people in the city can get lost in the city, on Martha's Vineyard you can't get lost. If you are coming out of the jail down here, everybody knows that, either from reading the newspaper, or it's a lot of the times it's a case of round up the usual suspects and fill the jail with them again, and then release them again. And like I said, continuum of care, there's no halfway house for addicts down here. There is a sober house. There are no beds for mental health on the island. So if anyone gets out of jail and has unmet medical needs, they're not going to get it filled down here. So a lot of people leave without any prescriptions. But again, it's not the provenance of the jail to be giving people scripts of meds on the way out the door. So that's one of the things we deal with. It's just so expensive. And the fact that you cannot reintegrate into the community without being seen. So
right.
A strange
You're
thing.
saying that there's a cyclical pattern over time. Rosa, would you say that you see this longitudinally over time as well, that the same people are incarcerated over and over again because of lack of care or other factors that aren't dealt with correctly upon reentry?
Oh, definitely. That's a huge issue. I'd say those that are sick, maybe with like mental health problems, also those with substance abuse problems, and then also those who just don't have a lot of support, whether that be with like family or also just financial support. Those I'd say, tend to be the ones that have just a really, really tough time transitioning back into society and may end up returning to prison, unfortunately. So.
Mm-hmm. So in that case, what does recidivism normally look like in your community? Is it usually the same crime that's committed? Is it parole violations? I'm curious. Matt, would you like to take the lead on this?
Yeah, I think it depends on how you are categorizing recidivism. If you don't count parole violations, then a lot of people do fairly well getting out. But a lot of people have conditions on them that there's no way they can fulfill them. Pay your parole fees every month. If you're not working and you're not making money, that's not going to be on the top of your list. Test positive. Well, if you've gotten no services while you were inside and come back out to the same community and start using, you are going to get caught again. So whether you pick up a new charge or you violated your probation or parole, to me are two different categories of reoffending. A parole violation, while it can put you back inside, is not really an offense because it's a parole violation. You may not have broken a law, but you've broken a condition, which is a little less than a law, but you put on the people who are most likely to be in trouble another thing that they can't do. They have a hard time walking that path. It's a hard path to get out and get back to a normal life when you had things that were there before you went in that are there the second you walk out the door. Unless you were given some skills inside to think better or to react less angrily, then you're the same person walking into the same situation now with added burdens of you can't be around this person, you can't be in this neighborhood, whatever they may be. There are conditions that are hard for some people to fulfill.
That's an excellent point.
You may come from a crime, generations of crime, and when you go home, you're living with what society has labeled criminals. So it could be your mom or your brother or your cousin, but you are living with criminals. So another thing you can't do. So.
That's an excellent point. Rosa, would you say that these same conditions cause recidivism in the two categories that Matt just brought up?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'd say, at least with the population we work with, a lot of people, I'd say is actually close to maybe around like 40% of people in our population return to prison. So, and I'd say the vast majority of those are for parole and probation violations as well. But yeah, I'm sorry. Would you mind just repeating the two points?
Yeah, of course. So Matt, as I understand what Matt just said is that he categorizes recidivism into two categories.
Yeah.
So there's parole violations, in which case you haven't actually broken the law, and then there's actually committing a similar crime.
Okay. Yeah. I'd definitely say that is the same with our population as well.
Okay, wonderful. Um, so I would say, I mean, like now that we've covered all of the problems that, people face upon reentry, I'd love to talk some more about solutions and the solutions that you guys may have seen in your research or in your career, or even things that we're not doing well right now that could potentially be solutions if done better. And so first off, Matt, I'd love to ask you, like, what factors or vehicles do lead to successful reentry now that we've covered all the things that can often inhibit it? If you have any ideas, we'd love to hear them.
Oh, as basic as it sounds, make sure that the person who is leaving has a plan that they can follow with certain short-term goals, like before they even walk out the door. Make sure that while they're inside, if there's someone on the outside who can help them get a copy of their birth certificate, get a copy of their Social Security card, simple things like that that'll make it when they walk out, instead of spending a couple of weeks trying to get those documents so they can apply for a job. Set up some interviews before they get out if you can. The way it works down here is if I find someone who's willing to hire what I call my guys, and I work almost exclusively with men, but that is the breakdown usually of any Office of Community Corrections. And we do not house women at our jail, only males. So anyone who's working while in the jail with me is a male. Across, I mean, no way is it as diverse as a city, but the population predominantly white, but we have over the past couple of years started having more Brazilian people who have come to the island for work who are being arrested. The population of the island is mixed, so African American guys, Wampanoag, Native American, but mostly it's young guys between 18 and 30. One of the things the island just got is through the Youth Drug Task Force, they got money to work with people between 18 and 26, a very underserved population, and an age gap that has a lot of people who have been incarcerated or arrested. So working with that, I can now steer people to them, and they can get them free counseling, mentors in the community, in banking, in employment, all sorts of things, which is a great asset. But the things that work is making sure they have again, as simple as it sounds, a plan for when they walk out the door. People who walk out the door and can turn in any direction usually don't turn in the best direction for themselves. But if I can say to them, you're getting out Tuesday, here's your ID, here's your resume, here's 3 people to mail it to. I make sure every person I work with has a email account, because most jobs that you see in the newspaper don't want you sending a resume in paper, don't want you showing up, don't want you calling. They want you to email them your resume, they'll get back to you. I teach guys basic computer skills for when they get out, so they can fill out applications online, things like that. And the things that work are getting the education, finding out what their skill sets are, and getting people in the community to give them a shot. And again, this is a small community. I've had guys that I've sent on job interviews literally to the victim of their crime, because I don't know whose house they broke into or whatever. And that's a small island. It's happened more than once where someone will call me back and say, did you know that's the guy that stole my car? No, I didn't realize that. I apologize. So.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. But I love what you just said about making sure that people who are reintegrating, A, have a plan, and B, really have a support network, like even having someone that they can come to, or like a mentor, or someone who can help them in their job search. Rosa, does that sound true based on your research?
Oh, definitely. One of the biggest things that people often recited, like in their interviews, multiple times, was just the need for employment. Even if they weren't making a lot of money, it's really just like the sense of empowerment that it offered, and also just having the ability to help yourself after just being down for a pretty long time. So yeah, employment is definitely something that a lot of people facing reentry are looking forward to. Also, housing, just having a place to live and to be independent, to gain your independence, that can have like a huge impact, as well as also family support. Those with families tended to do a lot better, have more smoother transitions back into society, versus those who didn't. Those are the ones that typically struggled or bounced around from place to place, different shelters. Yeah, just that, I'd say that trauma or that fear of not knowing where you're going to stay or have your next meal, that can often, I guess, influence people maybe to, I'd say that's more or less like something that would, I guess, lead to recidivism as well. So yeah, employment, housing, and family support, they're like really 3 key things for success.
That sounds like a great summary of what is necessary for a successful reintegration. So I would say that, I would say that those things are fairly difficult for someone working in corrections to like make sure someone has. Like, it's fairly difficult to make sure that every person has family support. So what resources would both of you say should be made universally available based on your experiences to those leaving a jail or prison setting? What kinds of resources should the institution be responsible for providing that would best equip the people that it's sending off for the kind of success that would prevent them from any more instances of recidivism?
You're not going to stop people that skill. It's outside the wall. People let the health workers in the community know that someone that's coming out of jail needs to see somebody. And even if it's just a check-in, it gives them a chance to meet some, and it gives the idea that somebody is looking out for when they get outside the door, instead of now it's your problem, we've had them for 18 months, now you deal with them. A lot closer faith community would help. People that are coming out, if you're not already doing it, places to meet, AA meetings, NA meetings, people coming out that just need to meet because they're having the same struggles as other people that of jail. It's a community, but it's way on the down low, because most of us don't deal with people that are in prison unless we work there or they're our family. I don't know many people that are in jail that I don't work with have the same exact issues. Not the condition of their being released might be you need to have a place to live that we can check out. You need to have made an appointment with a mental health counselor before you can get out. You need to prove to us that you live a job before you get out. Martha's Vineyard in the 2 books because there's just not enough work. That in itself is a violation of probation, to be working under the table. So, and again, that's not down here. That's everywhere. Guys get out and maybe $20 under the table. How do you prove to your PO that you're working if you're getting under the table money? So it looks like you're not working. Needs to be a continuum of care. You need to walk out the door, again, with a plan. Should be interviewing you on the way out to see what you. They probably gave you an LSCMI on the way in, so they knew what was wrong when you were coming in. It shouldn't be the same problem when you're walking out. Things should have been addressed while you were inside.
That's an excellent point. And Rosa, is there anything that you would like to add to that? That you think that should be the institution's responsibility to provide upon reentry?
Well, yeah, I think when I think about this question, yeah, one of the main things I would just add is that if there was some way that just these institutions can provide people with just more resources and opportunities to, I guess, help them become more independent people and citizens, rather than like fostering that dependence off of the system, I think they'd just be a lot better off. And that might just mean like a redistribution of resources or funding, maybe into programs such as like job training programs or any sort of employment program. Also health resources as well, things that just bring people back to, that can help people just become functional, I guess, contributing strong members of society. I think that's the best thing we can do. So, I definitely agree with Matt's points as well.
Yeah, I like what both of you said, especially about the continuum of care. And I'd like to follow up on that and say, now that we've talked about the solutions that need to be offered on the institutional level, what types of changes do you think need to take place on a state or federal level to improve outcomes for people leaving prison?
Want to take this one, Rosa?
I'd say mostly, just not to be repetitive, but I'd probably just say almost the same thing that I said before. Really just, I'd say providing people with opportunities just to really become independent. And I know there are just so many, a lot of people who are released, at least from what I've researched, they're just constantly limited by their parole and probation violations, and it's often some sort of mishap or mistake that will send them right back where they started. Or so I think maybe it'd just be like a restructuring of some of our policies, as well as like a reallocation of funds to programs that really help people land back on their feet and really build their own independence and confidence as well, for the future. And I think that can just have drastic, that will lead to like drastic change.
Wonderful. And my last question to both of you is, what kind of place do you see for college students and young people to get involved in issues around reentry? So Matt, I know you have a daughter who is also fairly young, and Rosa, as someone who is about to graduate college and pass on the torch to a new generation of activists, what place do you think young people have in this conversation around reentry, and especially how changes can be made on the institutional, state, and federal level to facilitate reentry?
I think the way college students could help is if the colleges themselves were to put classes aside where people could learn, like some of the assessments that we use inside, the LSCMI, the Level of Service Case Management Inventory, and it's how you find out, like Rosa was saying, I don't know if they just interview people or if you use an assessment tool when you do that, But if you use that assessment tool, it will tell you what was their educational background, who did they hang out with, what they do with their leisure time, are their families involved in crime, and a whole myriad of things that if you take them up separately, they don't seem to say much. But if you have someone who started getting arrested at 15 and was in jail at 17 and was in jail until they were in their 20s, that's a different person to deal with than the kid who was driving with his friends, got pulled over, and they happen to have a half an ounce of pot with them, and they all get convicted, blah, blah, blah. Those kids, when they get out, should have an easier route to, and this goes back to your last question, to having things like that expunged. I mean, there are jobs you can't get because you were 17 years old and got caught with a pot pipe and 2 grams of pot. But when you go to get a job where you need to be bonded, 20 years later, they still go, oh no, you had that conviction for possession of Class E, and that doesn't help anybody. Ways to get things that were quaffed continue to erased off your query. You should be able to come up with a clean query if you've been clean for 15 years. I mean, the odds of someone who never got arrested again being arrested again are slim to none. Pay that person. Get felonies expunged after misdemeanor arrests expunged in a short period of time. That would help immensely for our guys and women. I've lost track of your question.
No, Matt, that was a great point about the need for expungement, especially for young people. And that's something that is also offered in many law schools. So, you know, students who are interested in law and criminal justice reform can help expunge the records and help with the expungement process. So that's definitely something that college students often do get involved in. Rosa, as someone who is very close to the age group and is just about to graduate, do you have any other thoughts to close us off about how college students should and can get involved?
Yeah, definitely say for anyone who is interested in this type of work, just to dive right in, start reading the current literature that's out there, and also, yeah, if there are groups at your school that are doing this type of work, join in or go ahead and start your own group. It's not too difficult if you just grab a couple of friends or classmates and really just start talking. That's really the first step. And then also really just getting involved in the communities, especially these communities that suffer from things like mass incarceration. And also, yeah, I think there's a lot of great work that's happening in communities, and yeah, just talking with people that are affected, you really can learn a lot from them. A lot of them really do know what's going on and they understand it. They just their voice is really just silenced. So I'd say, yeah, talking with people and just being proactive, that can really make a difference. You can really do a lot as a college student.
Wonderful. Thank you both for being on the call tonight, and thank you to everyone who is watching this now or later, and thank you to Matt and Rosa, and have a great evening. Wonderful.
Bye.